Republicans in Congress start to step it up. They've sent many letters over to the Department of Justice, and many of those letters have gone unanswered. But we know that things start slowly, and then they go a little bit more quickly, and then we get to Subpoenaville, which is where we might be now. Remember that Congress has already demanded answers about these 11 Department of Justice officials. We've read through this letter that included demands for testimony and interviews with people very important to the Hunter Biden investigation and to the crime family cover-up. People like Leslie Wolf, whose name came up when Gary Shapley was testifying. She was at the Department of Justice. Many people suspect that she was the person who was tipping off the Hunter Biden individuals about the search of the storage facility, and that she was the choke point that was declining and stopping the investigation from maturing. So she got a request for a transcribed interview. So did this guy, David Weiss, number 6, the actual U.S. attorney in Delaware. The people they keep saying is a Trump-appointed attorney that has all the authority to do whatever he wants, except 2 whistleblowers, including a gay Democrat, have said that that is not factually accurate, that the DOJ stopped the actual investigation from progressing. David Weiss, we want to hear from him. Matthew Graves, the U.S. attorney out of Washington, D.C., same guy who's responsible for a lot of the J6 horrors, involved in declining a request for prosecution brought by David Weiss in Washington, D.C., said no. So wherever Weiss went, Biden-appointed U.S. attorneys declined him. So now Congress said, all right, look, we asked nicely. We said we wanted to talk to those 11 people. You're not responding to us, Mayor, and we've got some problems with that. So this letter goes over to the Honorable Merrick Garland, sent July 21st, 2023 by our familiar friends Jim Jordan, Jason Smith, and James Comer, various congressional committees. They say, all right, Mayor, now in the wake of the testimony from the brave, indeed, IRS whistleblowers about the special treatment for Hunter during the course of a criminal investigation, our committees are conducting oversight of the executive branch and the executive branch's commitment to impartial justice. We're also investigating the truth of the statements that were made to us in Congress. And Mayor, as part of this oversight that we have in Congress, we sent you a letter back in June, and we requested that you make 11 DOJ officials, the same 11 we just showed, available for transcribed interviews before the Judiciary Committee. The departments from you, Mayor, you sent us a letter back on July 13th, and you raised several bases for why the department could not comply right now. And we write to address those objections, Mayor, and reiterate our request for your voluntary cooperation, because if it's not voluntary, could be trouble. They say that the department's response letter from you, from the DOJ, you questioned our legislative purpose in conducting our oversight. They said that they had no legitimate basis for investigating Hunter Biden. But they respond, they say, hold on a minute now. There is no serious dispute that committees in Congress have legislative purpose to examine how your department handles these matters. The Supreme Court has recognized that Congress does have broad and indispensable power to conduct oversight, and that a legislative purpose is valid if it concerns a subject on which legislation could be have. Very broad. And so in this matter, Congress may consider a number of legislative proposals, including reforming, for example, the special attorney laws, or special counsel laws, or the tax laws. We could reform all sorts of laws, including DOJ interactions with the IRS. We could expand the ability of IRS whistleblower laws, and we could share tax info with Congress if we wanted. Supreme Court has said we could do all of these things, and we can focus on information that leads to executive branch corruption, Mayor, and maladministration and inefficiency. And whistleblowers have brought forward numerous concerns backed by contemporaneous documentary evidence of corruption and preferential treatment of Hunty-Poo. Maladministration coming against in the form of retaliation against whistleblowers, and inefficiency in an investigation so bogged down by delays and micromanagement that the statute of limitations lapsed, which was completely intentional, before prosecutors could file certain charges. These are among the matters in which the committee requires testimony to do our job. And Mayor, your letter also asserted that you may not engage with Congress about pending investigations. You cited some non-binding 23-year-old letter. The idea that you can dictate the timing and the scope of our oversight is ridiculous. Even assuming the department is correct, other courts have acknowledged that the District of Delaware is going to consider Hunter Biden's plea agreement on July 26. And at that time, our understanding is that the department's prosecution will have concluded that the matter will be closed, and there will no longer be any reason for the department to not comply in full with our requests. So in other words, give us the documents after the fact. The department's response to us endorsed the statements that were previously made by David Weiss about his authority. But Weiss's representation about his authority has shifted over time. Initially, in the response to a letter that was addressed to you, Merrick, Weiss said, "I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for where, when, and how to file these charges." But in another letter, Weiss claimed that his charging authority is geographically limited to his home district. So what happened? Ultimate authority is one solution versus geographically limited. David, what's the problem? If a fellow U.S. attorney, like in California or D.C., declined to partner, then Weiss wouldn't have the authority to do it. But he explained that then he could get special attorney status, and he was, quote, assured that it would be granted. They say, look, in other words, Merrick, in your first letter, Weiss represented to our committee that he had been granted ultimate authority. But in his second letter, he was assured that he would be granted authority. So did he have the authority or not? And David Weiss provided no explanation of who would make the determination of that necessity. And if he would be granted, that means he doesn't have full authority because he has to go to somebody to get that authority. These are inconsistent, and it's not possible for both of them to be true. So who is lying? Is it Merrick or is it David? Weiss's shifting arguments about his authority to bring charges against Hunter, especially his claims that he had authority to bring charges outside of Delaware, suggest that improper political considerations factored into your investigative and prosecutorial function. Some of Weiss's statements to the committee contradict his own statement to line-level investigators. People like Gary Shapley says that he told them he was not the deciding official. And we know further that on a recent teleconference with Judiciary Committee staff, the Justice Department confirmed that Weiss would in fact appear before Congress. And while we look forward to Weiss appearing at a hearing, we got to still investigate this. And as we explained, we want to interview those witnesses, all 11 of them. The department has made available non-Senate confirmed and line-level employees in the past. We expect no deviation from this precedent there, Merrick, and we write to reiterate our request. So those 11 people, we want to hear from them. And we look forward to hearing from you. And look at this. This is why we read these entire letters. Absent cooperation with this request, Merrick, the Judiciary Committee will issue subpoenas to obtain the required testimony, period. Oh yeah, that's good. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Sincerely, your friends, Jim Jordan, Jason Smith, and James Comer over in Congress. Now that's what we like to see, huh? Right there, baby. Get those subpoenas warmed up. Get those pens rolled out. The next step is probably another threat, and then maybe a subpoena, and then probably a subpoena. So we still got a little ways to go. However, it's still a nice word on a government letter to the DOJ. We can enjoy it. So Senator Ted Cruz says, all right, look, the DOJ has been totally involved in a cover-up here. It's obvious. We want to interview these people. The House wants to interview these people. We all want to get to the bottom of it. Here's Lion Ted.
Listen, the only possible conclusion is that the Department of Justice and the FBI were engaged in a rampant cover-up, of Hunter Biden's illegality and bribery scheme, but most importantly, a cover-up of Joe Biden's involvement. You know, we had just yesterday 2 IRS whistleblowers testify before the House Oversight Committee, both senior career IRS employees, both Democrats. They don't have a partisan axe to grind. Their testimony was riveting. Their testimony was damning. As you know, Larry, I do a podcast every week, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, called Verdict with Ted Cruz. Well, it so happens late last night, at about midnight last night, I brought in and interviewed James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and we did 2 back-to-back episodes over an hour long. So part 1 is airing today. The podcast is out today. Part 2 is coming out tomorrow. And we spend over an hour walking through systematically what is the evidence of corruption. What is the evidence of corruption from the 170 suspicious activity reports that the banks filed, from the millions of dollars that were coming to shell companies that were going to the Biden family? What did the IRS whistleblowers testify to? And so today's podcast walks through for the first 30 minutes. Comer going chapter and verse. Tomorrow finishes it. It really was designed because, you know, if you're reading the newspaper or watching TV, you get just a minute or two about it. And if you really want to understand, you've got to do a deep dive to examine the facts and evidence. And among other things, the testimony yesterday that Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's attorney general, engaged in multiple felonies, including lying to Congress under oath and obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
Those Fox producers are going to get irritated about him coming on Fox and shilling his show. But his point is true. It does take a deep dive. You do get more value when you subscribe to longer form content on the internet and you keep coming back and share the shows with your friends. It's much better when you do that than joining in on these other networks. So that's Ted Cruz. Certainly we'll continue to cover the 11 DOJ officials. We want to know what they know. We want to hear from them. Leslie Wolf, David Weiss, Matthew Graves, and others. And of course, we'll cover as this unfolds. Hopefully you subscribe as we continue to drive along and you join us as we do.